Right, so we are live with Ana Francisco, who I am so privileged and honored to be speaking to after a few years since last time, and quite a few years since Anna was at lindaschool.
Yeah.
Anna, welcome, and thank you so much for being with us today.
Well, thank you for having me.
And when I asked for you to send me your bio, I had a little bit of a notion of some of the stuff you've been doing because I sometimes speak to your mom, but I really didn't realize how much you have achieved since that time when you were in high school, when you were our student. Wow. Hats off to you, Anna. That's amazing. I really, really was very impressed. And the thing is, it's not only that that's impressive. For me, the most impressive thing is how humble you are. Really. So, Anna, what would you like to share about what your life is like at the moment as a consequence of everything you had learned before in your formatory years in your high school at Linda School that then brought you into the life you have now?
Um, so right now, I'm in New York. I'm a researcher. I'm a cognitive neuroscientist. When I started this job, I would always say that I was a researcher, and then I learned how to say the full title. That sounds much more impressive. And that's because every time I would enter the US, you have to go through costumes and they always do this interview, like all these questions asking you, why are you here? And what are you doing here? So every time I would say I was a researcher, they would ask me many more questions after that. And once I realized that if I say I'm a cognitive neuroscientist, they would shut up immediately and let me in because they don't know what to answer after that. So now I say I'm a cognitive neuroscientist.
And you say it confidently, right?
Yeah. Uh, so basically, I focus on a couple of rare diseases and schizophrenia. So that's my main work.
Wow.
And I also teach. I teach at the graduate psychology program here in the Bronx, cognitive neuroscience. So that's what I do. And I mean, as a scientist, my primary language is English. Of course, my time at Linda School was fundamental to what I've accomplished. I mean, even back in Portugal, when I started my psychology degree, most of the textbooks were in English. So it was really crucial for all my career and my education.
At the time when you were a student, did you already envision yourself as being a neuroscientist, a researcher, what you've become?
Yeah. So I'm a long-term goal kind of person. And that I think uh, from early on, I decided that I wanted to be not only a researcher, but a cognitive neuroscientist. I was always fascinated by the brain, like how all these cells that are such kind of a biological abstract concept are able to work in a way that makes us who we are. Um, I was always fascinated by that. So that's what I wanted to do. And since I think the last 2 years of high school, I worked towards becoming what I am now. And sometimes I think, should I have reevaluated meanwhile? Just stop and think, wait, is this really what I want to do? And I never did because I knew what I wanted to do and I was going to go do that. But yeah, I'm happy that I didn't reassess. I'm happy doing what I am doing now.
You know that is quite unusual because in general, and from what I've heard from many youngsters, it's hard to have a definition of what you want to do at an early age, like in 10th, 11th, 12th grade, or even in 12th grade, people are still trying to figure out in general, okay, what do I want to be? But you had a very clear focus. This is what I want to be, and you have achieved it. So generally, I only ask this question at the end of the interview, but I'm going to ask it right now, which is, what piece of advice can you give other children, youngsters, adults, everyone, for them to be able to achieve their dreams, whatever they have really, really felt that they want to do or become or endeavor?
So let me just start by saying that I think it's perfectly okay to not be sure what you want to do. You know, it's not like the way I am or did it is the right way to do it, because it is not. I mean, we are all different individuals. We all have our own paths, and sometimes while you are lost is when you really find yourself, you know, like you experiment different things and you explore, and then you reach that stage when you realize really what you are and what makes you happy. So long-term goal kind of situation and being focused and kind of obsessed with something is not the solution for
It's
everyone.
just one way of being. There are so
Exactly.
many others, right? And none of them is more right than the other.
Not at all. So yeah, I was lucky because I had that idea of what I was and what I wanted to become, and it worked out for me. But I think that regardless of the way you go about it, I'm going to say that I mean, I think you actually touched upon that a little when you were saying like what you feel is the right thing for you. And I feel like being determined, being insightful, so really think about who you are, what makes you complete and happy. And then something that I found very important for me throughout my life is just be yourself, regardless of what the others think about you. When I was like way back, many lives back, um, I um, I struggled sometimes with being myself, but still not let other people's judgment get to me. Because it's hard. You want to fit in a group, you want to be popular, and that's sometimes not consistent with who you are and who you want to be. So I fought hard to keep being myself regardless of the judgment and the misconception that people had about me and the misbelief that people had in me when I was back in Tamar, and now I'm here. So just trust yourself, trust your instincts, and go for it. Be bold.
I've now I'm gonna reveal. I saw a post on your Facebook profile on your feed exactly about what you're sharing right now about self-acceptance, which is, as far as I observe and see, any human's greatest challenge
Yeah.
is accepting oneself exactly as you are, coming to a point where you are no longer worried about what other people are going to think about you, or whether you look in the right way, you look right, or whatever. So what you've just shared comes in that line. Is there anything else that, because you work also with mental illness and of course also depression and all of those um, situations that people face in today's world, which is so demanding, is there anything you'd like to share towards making self-acceptance more easily accessible?
That's such a hard question.
I really know that. But I'm sure
I wish
you
I
have
knew.
the wisdom.
I I wish I knew some answer that would fit everyone, and like here it is, you have these three, and you do it, and you'll be fine. And that's not true at all. I mean, it's definitely, and I agree with you. I think this is true for everyone, even for those of us who don't want to admit that. there's always something with which we are unhappy with ourselves based on what we think society wants from us. And to me, so to me, I think two things were important in my path of self-acceptance. One was to understand where those insecurities were coming from. So a lot of like inner work and not be afraid of seeking help. And I think this is something that I cannot get tired of stressing, is that seeking help is normal, is fine. And there cannot be any shame related to seeking help when you need it. And it has nothing to do with mental illness. It has to do with becoming better, becoming happier with who you are. So it's kind of a positive psychology kind of situation instead of psychology, or yeah. So focused on the positive that you have and grow from there. I said there were two things, but I forgot the second now.
Well, you've actually said two, but you can now add another one.
So I have a third one. And to me, so my professional life is very demanding in terms of self-concept too. So as a scientist, you are constantly dealing with rejection, and that can be very hard for your self-concept, you know, like, am I enough, or are these no's and these rejections relating to the person that I am, or only to the work that I'm doing? And sometimes not even the work. Sometimes you get these cranky reviewers, grumpy people that just like to say no because no is much easier, or feels much nicer than yes sometimes, you know. So it wasn't always easy, and still is not, to separate what is my professional concept from my really personal self-concept. And to me, it helped finding other things to do that I love and that really brings something to my self-value and my self-concept that is not exclusively based on my professional, on my career.
You see, that's a really beautiful piece of wisdom that I'm sure can serve many, because most of our life is spent at work, so we tend to forget that we are beyond that as well. And also, in general, people tend to compare themselves to each other a lot, and especially in the workplace, when in fact it's not about who you are, it's about whatever you are doing or have done. And sometimes it's not even about what you're doing or it's just about the other person.
Exactly.
And their concepts and their view, and that's okay. So thank you so much, Anna, for accepting the challenge.
It wasn't easy.
Yeah, it's never easy, because it's one of the greatest challenges for everyone, really. Self-acceptance is. I usually ask people that I've been interviewing, our ex-students, what did you bring from lindaschool that was not only your English expertise? So is there any life skill or life skills? Are there any life skills that you brought from your time that you spent with us?
So, I mean, I think English was the biggest, most important thing. But I mean, if I have to think back, I'd say, so I was always, and I still am, quite introvert. And I used to be very shy, I'd say, not in like family context or friend context, but in public. It wasn't always easy for me to communicate, to just talk, like small talk, whatever. Still, sometimes now I struggle a bit with that, like elevator kind of talk. But I mean, in my career, I had to really overcome that fear of talking in public, because I have to talk in public like all the time. And I think lindaschool actually really helped me with that, because we had to, even at the start when our English was not still not very good and all that, we were really, I mean, we were definitely asked to talk to our colleagues and to the teacher and to talk out loud. And I think that helped me a lot building up this ability of talking in public, for sure.
Yeah, and that ties into the same theme we were talking about, which is self-acceptance, because many people have a fear of expressing themselves in front of others, especially because they feel that they might not be saying the right thing, or it might not be accepted or acceptable, or they might be making a mistake, especially when you're speaking in a foreign language that is not your mother tongue. That challenge is even higher. And we notice usually that students who find it harder to speak are not necessarily students that are not excellent students, that they really have good writing skills and have their vocabulary together and they know their grammar. But then when it comes to speaking, it's more about self-confidence than anything else. So that's why it's self-acceptance, self-confidence are such relevant themes when it comes not only to education, to work, but to life in general, and also in personal relationships, of course. In your work, I remember you spoke once to a class of mine, which was the same level as when you had been at lindaschool and was my student. You were my student towards the end, and you spoke about some research you were doing into was it attention deficit disorder, or was it hyperactivity? It was something related, or no, dyslexia.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yes, dyslexia. So from then to now, is there anything that you'd like to share openly, like with us common mortals, non-scientists, that is relevant and that can also help parents with who have children with dyslexic symptoms, and people who also deal with dyslexia themselves?
Yes, so my research completely moved away from dyslexia. So I can definitely share with you what I guess I shared then. So dyslexia I did during my PhD. So I stopped doing dyslexia research in 2016, actually. And since then, I've been focused on other stuff. But I think that maybe the dyslexia stuff is more relevant to more people than what I do now. That is much more specific to rare diseases that most people haven't heard of. So during my PhD, what I focused on was really characterizing how the deficit in dyslexia, but focused on the speech deficit. So how, because the thing with reading is that we are not born knowing how to read, right? Reading is something that we acquired very late in the evolution process as humankind. But we always communicated with sounds. So the idea is that maybe in dyslexia there's some kind of problem that is more related to speech, to language, and that later on translates into difficulties with reading, because one thing evolves from the other. So I think in terms of, like, in practical terms, the thing about dyslexia that I figured out through my research is that it might be really important for interventions with dyslexic kids to have many more audiovisual activities and exercises rather than focusing on what they have more difficulty with, right? You can imagine if you think you are bad at something, and if people are trying to help you with that thing that you think you are bad at, it can be a very frustrated frustrating process, and it actually
And you create a barrier,
exactly,
right?
but it goes back to what we were talking about self-confidence and self-concept and all that. So the thing about my research is I really advise to work around that and think about activities that are working, reading things, reading difficulties, but using different methods, more focused on speech and audiovisual concepts.
So basically, what I understand from what you're saying is that instead of focusing on the fact that dyslexia is eventually a problem, focus on the fact that there is a different way of learning and teaching when you are dealing with people who have this so-called dysfunction.
Yeah,
So, not looking at it as a dysfunction, but simply as a different way of expressing, of learning, and of teaching,
exactly.
right?
Something that I noticed during my research is that when individuals with dyslexia are looking at faces that are talking, they activate much more. So we put the people in these like MRI scans, these gigantic magnetic scans, and we show them things and we see which parts of the brain are being are lighting up. So they are active during that task. And what I saw was that for those with dyslexia, actually the very, very tiny part of the brain that deals with processing faces is much more active when they are looking at people talking than the controls, so the people without dyslexia. So it can mean that actually they have an advantage there. So we could focus more on that than on their weaknesses. So focus on strengths rather than weaknesses. We just need to be creative. I can't hear you, Tanya.
Yeah, now I was muted, sorry, because of the sound of the sea, so it doesn't interfere with your speaking. So, actually, in fact, we could say that basically it's easier to say that someone else has a problem than to change the way we do things, right?
Yes,
And what people with that eventual non-problem are inviting everyone else to do is, do something differently, do it differently, and you will realize that I have intelligence and that my intelligence works in a different way. Just would be the same thing with autistic people, or with Asperger, um, which is milder, and there are many students at schools, at public schools, who are brilliant,
yeah,
very, very bright, but then, of course, not learning in the same way as everyone else. So
yeah, exactly.
basically, just the concept we have, right?
Yeah, so it is very true. So it seems like us, the regular, typical people, decided that there's this form and we all need to fit that form. And if we don't, then there's something wrong with us. And that is incorrect. There's nothing wrong with anyone. We're just all different. And sure, even the ones that are considered typical or regular, or a term that I find boring, that is normal developing, all of us, we also have our own uniquenesses. We are not all the same. Like now I work a lot with schizophrenia, and I mean, schizophrenia is a devastating disorder, not only to the person that is diagnosed with it, but also to the families, and at, at a certain level also to the communities. But so you can think of schizophrenia as something during which the person has these abnormal sensory experiences. They see things, they listen to things that are not there, and therefore their brain must be abnormal, not typical. But you can also think, and this is not consensual, but you can also think of it as someone that has a brain that is able to see and listen to things that the all of us cannot experience. So I feel like there's you can always be as positive and as enabling towards others as you can be, or the complete opposite.
Yeah, because I see in your bio that you have been implementing work towards eliminating stigma related to mental health.
Mhm.
And do you do this through your teaching, or as a volunteer, or by sharing in public speeches, or like how do you bring this awareness to the public in general?
So it's a combination. I'm doing this series, actually also Facebook Live. I'm doing these mental health workshops starting September. I definitely share that as much as I can. I
Then
have,
please share the link afterwards in the comments for this video so we can also share it.
I will. I also have been recently aligning. I love photography, so I've been working on these projects of mental health in men, because somehow men think they cannot look for help. I that's something that I've been working a lot on recently. And the Bronx and the South Bronx particularly, we have a huge problem in terms of access to mental health. Not only because people feel like they don't need to access it, but also because they don't know how to. So those services are not widely made widely. They're not up there to these people, so they don't even know what it is to find mental health help. So yeah, public speeches, new workshops coming. I try to do that through my research too, and yeah, and photography.
Wow, that is so relevant, and actually what you're doing can also be used in other parts of the world,
Oh yeah,
in places like the Bronx, and which will make such a difference to everyone, because if people start having a different approach towards mental illness and having a different approach towards self-acceptance, the whole sphere of how we relate to each other and how we relate to ourselves changes completely, and that is groundbreaking, really.
yeah, definitely. That could change the world.
The last Yeah, it is really change. It's something that will change the world, definitely, towards a much more caring and accepting society, where people embrace the differences. Because
Yeah,
I also see here that you are working on racial and gender biases in science,
yeah.
um, which is another issue, right?
Yeah, I mean, we white people do science for white people, and we don't live this loop of whiteness. And I mean, I'm lucky enough to be in the Bronx, where I mean, the Bronx is really diverse. So I'm able to, without a lot of difficulty, incorporate racial and ethnicity difference in my research, but much more needs to be done. So we're starting a coding skills program in the South Bronx in collaboration with the Bronx Documentary Center for kids that are underrepresented in science, and females, because we are also underrepresented in a lot of science fields.
Yeah, we had Natercia Rodrigues was our first interviewee, and she's also a scientist, a chemist, chemistry researcher, and she's also been advocating a lot about women in science, and creating more of a balance. Actually, I would say removing the gender issue
Yeah,
altogether, and all of the STEM kind of approach, which is STEAM now, which includes arts as well.
Yeah.
Science, math, and art. You know what, Anna? I'm finding a line, a thread that is common to all of the interviews so far, and this common thread is such a joy to see, because all of you invariably are working towards, in your own personal life and in your work, towards acceptance, towards removing biases, no matter whether they are gender biases, racial biases, in your mental illness biases. Also, Raquel is just finished her course in criminal psychology, and went through an experience at a mental health hospital, where she was also faced with the challenge of viewing what mental illness represents, and how much bias there is towards that, how much lack of acceptance. And I'm looking at that, and I'm saying, many times, older adults, we tend to say, this younger generations are lost, and nothing is being done, and things are not going to change, and so on. And it's not true. And what I'm really happy that these interviews will show and prove is that it is not true, really. The age gap has been there forever for all of us. When each one of us is at a certain age, there's always an age gap towards older adults, and there's always this idea that the younger generations are lost and not doing anything or going anywhere. And it makes me really, really happy to see and to show, and for us to really all view that that's not true.
Yeah, I mean,
because that's also a bias.
Yeah, I think we're doing things differently, but things needed to be done differently, right? Because we haven't gone very far without things were being done before.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, the world has come environmentally, politically, economically, socially, etc., to the place where it is at the moment, with things being done the way they were before. So, I mean, something needs to change, and sometimes the bias doesn't allow us to see that change is exactly what is making the difference.
Yeah.
And that's such a privilege. I'm very, very happy to see that thread. And I'm sure I'm going to keep on seeing it throughout the interviews, because it's common to the generation. And actually, we are interviewing different generations.
Yeah.
So that's really a privilege to be witnessing that, to bring it out from each one of you. Thank you so much, Anna.
Thank you.
So we're going to end this Facebook Live. I'm really very thankful to all of the people who have been watching. Thank you for being there. And of course to Anna for accepting this invitation. I mean, because Anna is like this real big shot. It's true. And you found the time to speak to us from lindaschool, and I feel that as such a loving gesture, like as we're part of the family. And so, yeah, of course I can speak to you. That's a real wonderful experience, to be able to watch each one grow and expand into what you are all becoming. It's amazing. Thank you.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for bringing me the sea, the Portuguese sea. It was very nice talking to you.
Okay, yeah, we're here at the beach. I decided to do something different this time. Thank you very much, Anna. I'm gonna end the broadcast. Of course, next Sunday there is another interview, and I never reveal who it's gonna be, but it's surely gonna be fantastic as well, as it has proven repeatedly to be. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.